And joining us now to discuss the latest on the Iran war is political analyst and Martin Capital CEO, Rod D. Martin. Good to have you with us, Rod. Just walk us through the current state of the Strait of Hormuz to start with. You know, the U.S. has a naval blockade in place. Iran is restricting traffic. How is this playing out as leverage for both sides, and what's the risk to global energy markets?
Well, the blockade is working, first and foremost. So we have to say that because there's so many in the Western media who basically echo the Iranian position, kind of like Baghdad Bob back in the Iraq war a long time ago. This is just absurd to say that this isn't having a tremendous impact. And the impact is pretty simple. First, Iran is losing between $430 and $500 million a day. This is a country with 10 times the population of Israel and half its economy. It can't afford that. Perhaps the United States government could afford that, but the Iranian government certainly cannot. Most of that money goes to pay for the Iranian government, and the Iranian government is funded 80% by those oil exports we're bottling up. So what's happening? Well, first and foremost, Iran's reserve tanks are filling to the brim. They're not going to be able to pump oil more than a few days more. They are going to have to shutter those fields, or the wells will themselves collapse. And that's been the aim all along. Put them in a position where they simply die on the vine because they can't pay their troops. They can't pay their IRGC thugs. They can't pay the Shia militias they imported from Iraq to try to terrorize their people in the streets. All of that goes away. Now, will fanaticism be enough to sustain it? In some cases, yes. But in many cases, if you stop getting a paycheck and you still have your mortgage due, you still have your electric bill due, and there's a real threat that you're not going to have electricity at all pretty soon, you start questioning the wisdom of your leaders, even if you agree with the rightness of your cause. So that's where we are. And the truth is the president's plan is working brilliantly.
Okay, now let's turn to a different tack. We heard General Dan Caine suggesting Russia is helping Iran in this war. From intelligence sharing and satellite data to potential drone tech or diplomatic cover, what do we know about the extent of Moscow's support, and how does it potentially change the equation for the U.S. and for Israel?
Oh, it doesn't change the equation at all. We assumed this from the beginning. It was only a matter of degree. Russia is part of BRICS, obviously. So is Iran. They do have a lot of ties. Russia has made their nuclear program possible in many respects. Russia armed them with air defenses that we destroyed within the opening hours of the war. Russia has sent them a lot of stuff that turned out not to matter. The intelligence sharing actually does matter to the degree that they are able to conduct operations even now when their forces have just been decimated. And, you know, really all they can do in the Strait of Hormuz is use these speedboats to threaten commercial shipping. A speedboat is not a frigate or an aircraft carrier. They're down to bare bones. But what they do have is intelligence. The Russians have satellites overhead. They can tell the Iranians where this or that vessel may be. And that is a threat. Is it a major threat? No, we factored it in from the beginning. However, it's important to note that this isn't scoring Putin any points when it comes to negotiating a settlement in Ukraine. The president has an incredibly long memory, and when Iran is over, Russia's going to be a key focus.
Right. President Putin saying he could help extract that uranium from Iran, and President Trump responding reportedly that, you know what, I'd love you to just end the war in Ukraine instead. How about we start with that? Yes. So in terms of Iran, though, what's your take on the end game in terms of really reaching the end sooner rather than later?
Well, let's look at that with regard to both Iran and Russia. In the Iranian case, we're starving them. If we have to resume major hostilities, we've demonstrated a capability to take out the IRGC guys in the streets of Iran individually with drones, which just boggles the mind. It's incredible. You know, if you go back and watch a movie like Ed Harris's Enemy at the Gates, you know, you see how the snipers performed in World War II and what they had to do to take out individual soldiers in that battle. And now we do it by remote control from Nevada. It's just exceptional what's happened. And it means a ground invasion probably isn't necessary. So at some point, the economic pressure and potentially resumed military pressure gets you to a point where it's safe for the Iranian people to rise. I believe they will. Reza Pahlavi has said, you know, stay in your homes, go about your lives, don't get hurt until I give the signal. And we know that's in coordination with the White House. So that's how I think Iran ends. But at the very worst, we're going to get a more or less unconditional surrender out of them. As far as Russia, they're looking at this blockade and they understand what it means. We spent a good bit of the past few months interdicting shadow fleet tankers. They make their money from oil exports too. And that is all sanctioned. It's all under threat. And when the president has his full attention to focus on Russia, Russia is in trouble. So they're going to have to actually get more serious about the negotiations. And meanwhile, the Ukrainians have had significant advances and actually look like they could push the Russians back a bit. And that's a very surprising and helpful development.
And we will be watching all of this in the time to come with you. Rod Martin, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.